Thank you guys for joining. This is probably one of the sessions that we're going to keep it as real as possible. And my name is Robin. And if you don't know my amazing pastor and friend, Nickson Lino Goves. All right. So say welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
welcome.
So we're going to just talk a little bit, have a conversation. So why don't you guys just join us? And some of you might be thinking, who's this episode for? Like, should I watch it? Should I not watch it? Is it a waste of time? So I guess if this episode is someone who longs to worship, who loves to worship, who wants to know more about worship, and then especially for someone that's trying to figure out how do you worship in seasons that does not seem fair, does not seem like it's a God moment, does not seem like God is in it. Something like a valley where you're just left and it seems like you're left alone. So this episode is going to be all about that. All right. So we're going to get real. And when I say we, Mr. Nick is going to get very real, and I'll pitch in here and there. All right. So
Let's do this.
are you ready?
Yep.
Yeah. One of the things that I really want to talk about is how do we worship when things are not well, right? Like we all love to worship. Sundays we put on our best shirt, best suit, most of the time. And then we show up in church and we're like, let's worship, and then the rest of the days we are like, I'm in the valley, I need worship, I don't know how to worship, right? So kind of want to talk about all of that. But before we do all of that, why don't you kind of say a little bit about yourself, just your childhood, kind of just give us a history of where you've been, maybe your first 18 years, kind of just so we get a glimpse of what your story sounds like.
All right. 18 years, huh? So yeah, I was born in Bangalore, raised in Bangalore. I have an elder sister. I had a mom, or dad. So I was born into a family that was half Brahmin, half Catholic Christian. So we grew up as there's a lot of fights, a lot of family feud, religious tension, not knowing which paths to take. But still, thank God I ended up with the name like Nickson.
Yeah.
Could have been something else.
Yep.
Yeah.
We won't take any guesses.
Okay, you can. Just imagine, like today, today so many. Almost came out. But yeah, so my mom is really the hero of my story, especially in the area of faith for both my sister and me. And it is not a very I've heard many people tell this. I don't think I have a great testimony. I don't think I have I don't like what the other person has gone through. I think my mom's testimony is not a great testimony as well, because she didn't have a church. One pastor said, come to church. So she came and she took us. We liked the music in church, and that's why we stayed in that church. We like the music.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice, so musical. That's our faith story. But God can turn anything around and make it a very great story, And why I would say great story is because my mom has finished her race. She passed away 4 years ago. And she was really the one who stepped into faith. There was a lot of abuse at home. I have very very less memory of a father back in the childhood, and there would be times when he would drink. He was not a bad one. He was not a bad dad or something like that. But I remember instances of drinking. There used to be a new album back in those days. It's called Michael Learns to Rock. So he would play this song pain my love, oh, you pain my love. So it'll be loud, the speakers will be booming, but inside there'll be knives. Back in those days, we had a big Pond's dabba.
Wow.
I would see the pawns. My mom would be flinging pawns at his face, and he would be. Oh, there would be so much of abuse. They would raise music so loudly. So there was a. I think I had a dislike towards music because of that reason. And I in my free time, I don't listen to music. Listening to music is not something that I like doing. Probably it was because of a lot of trauma, childhood trauma was, oh God, every time we would go to school, mom would say, you'll come back and you'll find my dead body hanging. And so when math sir is, drawing the, root square, we'll be thinking of, who would do that to their children? My mom. I would imagine, and meals was, I think we were very highly malnutritioned. I really remember for 15 years, literally eating tomato goju. If you're a Kannadiga, you'll know that. Tomato goju, anna saru. Rice and tomato goju, and then you put one. So that was my childhood. It was not something that memorable, but what really stood out for me was the love of God in such a miserable time of my childhood. It hit me when I went to this new church with full of music. It hit me there. I don't know what happened. It was one evening service, and I felt the love of God. I was so excited. I think I was still in my shorts. I felt something. I ran. That was my first experience. When the love of God hit me, I ran. I ran around the pews of the church because I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was running over the mountains. And the background song of that event was Over the Mountains and Sea. So I felt like God was redeeming the hate that I had for music through worship. That's why for me, music is worship and not anything else. I don't like music. It's just, especially Western music, because that's where I've been hit the most. I have memories. But yeah.
So would you say that's like your defining moment with God?
That was one of my defining moments, very tender moment with God. I would say not defining. Defining was another incident that happened again in my teenage. So you asked till 18, right? So one incident that really stood out for me was we were almost sold into, because of all the religious hate and family feud, somebody sold our information. We were almost sold into sexual slavery. There were a few people who came promising that they'll take us to dad was abroad and stuff like that. We almost believed, but God intervened. That day I remember the questions I asked God. A teenage boy would ask God. I think it was teen. I'm not able to remember, but yeah, I remember the questions that a teenage guy would ask God. And I don't think it was teen. I think it was before that. And if you are real, show up in my life. And that day, the way he showed up was that I couldn't see my dad. They later got to know that they would have kidnapped us, sold us in Mumbai. Mom would have become a prostitute. My sister, I would have been sold into child sex trafficking. It's something that when I became much older, when I started inquiring, like how David says in the Bible, he always inquired. He was curious. And I started inquiring into my past. I realized this was one of the defining moments in my life. I didn't even know it. Wow. And that's why I believe in this line very strongly. You never know what God rescued you from. And that's why you will never know how good God is. You just have to plainly just believe it blindly that He is good. And it turns out He is much better than how good you credited Him to be. Wow. So that's yeah. And so for that season of my life, rescue was my son. Wow. I made you Jesus. So that is something that with my team, Living Waters, we used to do that a lot because that was my story, that was my testimony. That's how my teenage 18 ended. Wow. A lot of things, but just putting it all together.
Right? So that's like, it's insane. People that see you now, see you minister now,
Yeah.
they
They-
wouldn't have a clue, or they wouldn't be able to tell that you came from a place like that.
No.
They would think that
They
you
don't-
were born like this.
They don't think that I was born like this. I
Yeah.
was skinny. Oh God, scrawny. I was a stick walking around. Oh God, yeah, I was malnutrition. My sister, me, the house we lived in, the way. Oh, yeah. God has done an amazing job with our life.
Wow. So you touched on worship. So what does worship mean to you? What does that look like to you? Because a lot of people say, especially musicians, worship leaders, if you say worship, it's like the time that we get to play music, or that first part of the service that, it's all about us. What does worship look like for you?
So I've had many worship teachers, and I will go backwards
Yeah.
because I think the first was the best. So we all know Ray William. Ray William was one of my worship fathers, and
My brother too.
I forgot.
Don't mention. That's fine.
Yes, oh, sure.
All right.
His brother, Ray William, yes, was
And
my
his
worship-
father,
and
spiritual
he was
father.
my spiritual father,
Yeah.
my worship father. And I remember he's not a teacher. He wouldn't teach. I think he just lives his life, and I am an observer because of the kind of things that I came out of from my life. I observe. One of the things I always observed him is there was something about the Jesus he saw and the Jesus I saw. They didn't fit. The Jesus I saw was so jarring to the Jesus that he saw. My Jesus was religious, If you sin, cut your hand off, go to heaven without one arm. That was my Jesus, because that's how. But the minute I saw a Jesus that Rachel saw, and it destroyed the Jesus at least the image of Jesus that I've had. And that revelation it was a revelation of love, forgiveness, revelation that God is good, that God is ahead of you. I remember Chad one day talking, God is 200 years ahead of us, so God is for us. At the same time, God is also dad, God is a father, he admonishes. So this is something that I learned at Face2Face. And another thing, like for me, so worship was more like the painting over here. Worship was more, you can't see it. Worship is more of you giving all yourself and all that. We all know that. But if I were to go back to the foundations of worship that I've had, worship is not about you. One thing. I remember Sani Prasad drilling that into my head. Worship is not for you to feel good. Worship was never designed around you. Worship was designed around God. It was God feeling good. It was about God. It was about Him. It was about He enjoying what you do unto Him. It's about His worth. If I would go back again, Ken Hansen, worship is about the worth the Magi worshipped or paid homage or worshipped the worth of that boy, who was born to Mary. And so they bow down to the worth that he was going to carry the sins of the world. So worship is about that person. But my first worship teacher was none of them. It was actually a dream I had when I started attending this musical church. It was so nice music. So the first song that I encountered in this church was as soon as me and sister, when we sat on the third, fourth, fifth row somewhere there, and they started singing a old hymn, Holy, Holy, Holy. So that was the first time I ever heard the word holy. For me, holy was holy, hey, And I was like, what is holy? But even before my curiosity bowed down to the presence that was in the church. There was some presence that song was carrying. There was an anointing to that song. We understand it today, but back in those days, I didn't understand. I don't care what it means. There was something in me that literally bowed down as a boy. And I remember it invaded my mind, it invaded my dreams. And one day I had a dream. I was in a dream and I was fighting with my friend over a girl who had a ram. I have not understood that till date. I was more interested in the ram, not the girl. In the dream. So I told her, I was so happy that she had a huge ram, and I was like, come into my kingdom. I was a king in my dream. And the other king was invisible, right? He was my best friend, but he was also my rival. And then I was so angry, I took the whole kingdom in my hand and it fell on me. And I saw what appears for the first time death in my life. I saw I died, I saw my body was there, the ram was dead, I felt so bad. And the girl was there. I'm like, wait, I'm outside my body, and the cloud covered me. And I saw I was in an everlasting amphitheater. See, I'm able to describe this now because I'm 30 plus, I'm 33, I'm able to understand this. It was like an eternal dipping amphitheater, and I was in the last row, very last row, but I knew there were thousands and millions and gazillions of people. And in the center of this swirling mass of people, there was a man there. And he looked like stone. His face was chiseled like stone. And even though he was like a million years far away from me, his face was this big in front of me. He was that big. And I was caught up, and there was palm leaves, there were people in white, and there was something going around like that. The minute it hit me, like in a football field, they all sing one song and they all stand up. It hit me, something happened in my spirit. I started singing a song, salvation belongs to the Lord. And that was the first time in my life I lifted my arms up and I worshipped. It was not even in my physical, I worshipped first in a dream. Wow. And then I woke up. I don't know why this dream had to be submerged inside of me. And then there were these gossip ladies, gossip aunties in church telling, did you know there is Durga in the Bible? And so we were like, where is Durga? So I was very curious, kids. I'm like, wait. So I went looking for Durga, but I found Jesus. Wow. When I read Revelation, my infant heart stopped because I realized that's exactly what I saw. Revelation chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6. It's exactly, and it ends with this song, the elders singing salvation belongs to the Lord. Worship is spiritual. Worship is not just physical. He's my first teacher, and this is what I learned. Worship is not about feelings. Even when you die, your worship won't die. These are the mighty lessons I learned as a child. People will die, but what they did in worship will never die. Mary of Bethany died, but what she poured on Jesus is not dead because he is alive in the body, in the flesh. And that's why when he walks into the room, you can still smell the fragrance of what she did on him. So this carried with me. Worship is just this. People will die, but what you do unto Jesus will never die. And that is why I don't care whether I'm hungry, whether I'm sad, I will worship. Worship, when you can't sing a song, best you can worship. Worship is not even talking to God. Worship is just being in awe. Psalm 27. One thing I ask and that I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord, that I may gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. And that's enough. It's basically an overflow. When you see God, there's something that happens in you that you can't contain, and it overflows from within you without your permission. And I would call that worship. But don't wait until it overflows. Worship is intentional, because worship is you telling God, I love you too. So it's intentional. But at the same time, God does not want our pity love, God will not take a certificate of any sort for which he has not earned. He is good because he is good, he will be worshipped because he's worthy of it. And he will not receive our worship until unless we are not capable of seeing his worth. Yet he's humble enough that even though when we don't see his worth, he will still respect the fact that we long to worship him, and he will step down anyways. You can never confine, you can never put a definition to worship. And do not believe any definition out there about worship. it's a part of this everlasting definition.
So that's a good, like, a lot of people struggle with this, right? Like I think as believers, like we try to put a definition around everything, right? Definition around, for example, what the holy looks like, what righteous looks like. What does, for example, even titles like pastor, what does that look like? Believer, what does that look like, right? So has your perspective of worship changed year after year? For example, how do you keep worship fresh? I'm not saying finding the next song. How do you keep the perspective of worship so fresh that it does not become a religious thing that you just do?
Yeah. See, when you say you worship God, worship is sacrifice. So the foundations of worship will never change. That worship is about Jesus. It's about Jesus, and also it's about Jesus. As long as that never changes, there is an element of teachability that comes with maturity. Now, the more people get mature, they think they're entitled to an opinion, they're entitled to be heard, to be believed. Like, I'm entitled because I've gone through this so much. No, the maturity, the more you walked in something, the more God, you should be teachable. And what comes with teachability is correction. What comes with correction is God opening your eyes and showing you where potentially there were things that are wrong, but you so strongly believed in. And I won't say blunder. I would say wrong. It's pruning. The way you worshipped when you were a little boy is not the way you should worship now. I would say that. Yes, I would quote Ashwik from last year's internship. In God's presence, be childlike, but don't be childish.
Wow. Yeah.
There is a maturity. Like, one of the descriptions that God, when He declared, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm pleased," is basically, if you look into the Greek text of it, it says, "My son, mature son." There is a maturity that comes in worship. And half the time, being childish before God is not being childlike.
Wow.
God loves that you are childlike, but not necessarily that He will condone the childishness. So I think that's what Paul talks about in the great description or epilogue that we have about love, right? When I was a child, I reasoned like a child, I thought like a child, I behaved like a child. But now that I'm a man, I put my childish behaviors or things aside or put it away. Even getting rid of your childish behavior is an act of worship, because worship is about pleasing God. It's about growing,
Yeah. So, in your opinion, would you say there's a difference between being a worshiper and being a lover? And what do you think
Yes.
God prefers?
I would say very controversial. Thanks for putting me in this trouble.
Right? So,
but I don't care. I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a difference.
Should we be a worshiper of God, or should we be a lover of God? Like, what does God look at us as?
Okay. Okay. You might have okay, including you, all of us. Check your own life. Half the time we are lovers of God because we are worshippers of God. And it's not, I won't say it's not okay, but it's okay, because God is so humble that he stoops down and receives it. Yeah. But now that you're going to listen to this piece of information, it's time to put your childish ways behind. The highest command, the greatest of all, is to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And then it says, worship the Lord in the beauty of your holiness. Then comes everything else. You shall not bow down to any other gods. It's worship. Like, you shall worship me. So that is the third commandment, if you actually look at it. The second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And then the third is you shall worship me, not make any other images. I'm a jealous God. That means I'm quoting scripture so that you will not point to me. Point to the Bible, all right? Love the Lord your God. Love the Lord your God. There is a reason why we are born human beings. Why God created and intentionally made us human beings from matter. Because when you love, it takes a lot of, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And heart, soul, mind, and strength are emotional attributes. You know what I'm telling? So that doesn't mean that you go around being a crybaby and say, I love God. He'll understand. No, not that. How much you surrender that to who you were created to be, because we are predominantly spirit beings put in matter. How much you're going to use this. And you know what? You can only, I can love you with all my heart because I can express my heart with all my soul, with all my mind, with all my strength, because I can see you, feel you, touch you. And you know what? That availability was given to us as Emmanuel.
Yeah.
And that is why in Revelation and Daniel, you see an Ancient of Days literally giving up the throne for Jesus to sit on it, a Son of Man, human being, to sit on it, and angels and mankind worships him. And they worship him not because they have learned how to do it, they worship him because they have experience in loving him intentionally, humanly. And so I would say there is a difference between worship and loving God. And I think worship should be a fruit of intimacy and love. It shouldn't be the other way around.
Okay. What do you think John was?
Lover. Any day. Yeah.
Right? Beloved.
Beloved. Love,
right?
Yeah.
Jesus itself refers to him as beloved. Right?
3 times in the book of John.
He could have used any word. He could have used, but it was just beloved.
The instances, it was intimate instances. One is when Jesus tells John, his disciple, but it's actually John who's writing it. He calls himself the beloved, even more than Jesus calling him. And that is confidence, to know that I have loved the Lord so much that he knows that I am his beloved. Like, for example, last year on your birthday, I think I remember telling you I don't feel the need to wish you on your birthday because I think I have expressed my love throughout the year to you. And something like that. I think John was like that, and I love you. Wow, I'm seeing him after years.
That's on the camera.
Yeah, I shall never forget.
Wow.
Okay, so I think John was a lover.
Cool. Is it a reality
wait, before that, that's exactly why he received the revelation of Jesus.
Yeah.
And you know what? John, in the wonder of angels and everything, even bowed down and worshipped an angel.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, I think I've gone through this. And
Jesus was not offended.
Yeah.
Because John's foundation was correct. He was a lover of God.
Yeah.
And the angel said, hey, don't do that. Don't worship God.
Wow. So my growing up was a little different. So I grew up in church all my life. And we grew up with music and all those things. We loved music. But I think at some point, or probably it was there the whole time, it was everything about music, right? Even when I got an opportunity to lead worship, even though it was done from the right place or right heart, but soon I discovered that I fell into that trap of just doing it because it became almost like a religious thing. And it was, it's like you feel that you're good at it also, so it makes it even worse. Right? Because you're like, wow, I know how to do this. It's like an equation.
The correct emotion, the correct E minor.
Yeah.
The A minor.
Right?
Feel straight into
somebody comes and tells you, bro, that touched me, that ministered to my heart. You're like, okay, did my job for today.
And thrown for today.
Yeah. So I think that's been a journey for me personally, going from that to, you know what, it doesn't really matter what people say, like finding God for myself. How do I worship God? And I think one of my probably most favorite worship moments is in silence. I don't know if you guys have tried that, like when you just shut everything and just be quiet and just listen to his heart, and like being the beloved, like just, hey, I want to hear your heartbeat. So I just want to encourage you guys out there, if worship is becoming a formula, explore and challenge yourself to be a lover of God, and worship him from that place. Worship him from a place like John, where he was just next to Jesus, not to do the next miracle or anything. He just wanted to know him, get to know him. And out of knowing him, I mean, the revelations he's written in the Bible is like crazy, right? So that's awesome. So that being said, is it a reality that we can worship God every moment, every single moment? For example, like, can heaven, like 24 hours worship, right? 24-hour worship be a reality on earth right now?
I'll sing the song.
Day and night.
Heaven on earth.
Oh, heaven on earth. Yeah,
it is. It has.
So how do you do that practically, right? When you go about your own day, you're working, you're in college, you're in school, you're taking care of your kids, whatever you're doing. What is the practical?
That's exactly why the previous question will answer this question. Yeah. See, when you're stuck in a realm of wonder, the minute you leave the realm of wonder and reality hits you, you don't become a worshipper. That's why some people like, I know, I understand worship and all, but let's speak practical. I was like, no, you can't be practical, because it is one of the most obnoxious statements that I'm not allowed to use few words. So obnoxious statement.
We're going to be filtering certain words just for Mr. Nickson.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to. Yeah, so I've heard such things, but you know what? When you're in love, basically in Hindi there are different words for love, and the last word is junoon, or it's called obsession. And I think there is a time obsession might be, see, between Jesus and me, it won't be obsession. It would be absolutely normal. Between Jesus, me, and my best friend, or any out there, that person will be like, such a cheesecake you two are, But for a stranger out there, this is obsession. It's not right. Something like that. Have you heard of like toxic? But when you add that kind of an element with God, it becomes so holy. It's a holy obsession. And when you're obsessed with something, like parents about their children, you think of them every time, isn't it? Every time. They're 24 hours in their mind. And it's a possibility. If you can be a parent 24 hours a day, you can be a worshipper 24 hours a day. Think about it. And it's not, and you don't have to like it sometimes. It's fine.
It's not about you.
Yeah, it's not about you. Yeah, sometimes there are moments I am angry with God, and then I sit and think, my God, now I'm going to get angry with you, but I'll still worship you. But still I have to come and repent, because getting angry with you is also wrong, because you prove me right. So there is no point. He's so beautiful. You might as well just be obsessed about it. Yeah, and that's when one of the first signs or fruits of obsession is dreaming. And God talks to a prophet. When there's a prophet in the land, or when who's a prophet? A prophet who's always obsessed about what God has to say about this, what God has to preach. What do the people feel? People's complaints to God. But the prophet is like, get lost. I don't care what you feel, you rascals, you sinners. I want to talk. What do you feel, God? So a prophet. But that's what the verse is. When there's a prophet in the land, I speak to him first in dreams. Wow. Then visions.
So you're saying worshippers should be prophets?
Are prophets.
Are prophets.
Worshippers are prophets.
Wow.
Yeah, you cannot be so madly in love with person and not talk about that person. Worshippers must be opinionated. That's why I like Prakriti so much. So opinionated. Neha. I love their opinions.
Some of our friends for
Oh yeah, if
reference.
Alicia Rallen,
Yeah.
highly opinion. She knows their opinions are strong. You?
No, never.
Your opinion. Patra, Nihal has very strong opinions. No, because they've got that in worship. You know, they know they can figure out when there is a spirit of bull something.
Spirit of weirdness.
Yeah, they're like, that's no, and just walk away. They are mighty worshippers. For people who are watching, larger audience, Ray-William, one more person, wait, Sang, never, yeah, but he's like a David of this generation. I'm talking about Amit Kamble.
Pastor Amit.
And his opinions are beautiful. You'll not even feel like he has an opinion. You can just walk out because it's, worshippers must have an opinion about God and they must be loved.
Wow, so cool. All right, who do you relate to the most in the Bible? And why? Jacob. All right, it's like God just put this story in the Bible just for you.
Just for me.
Just for you. They're
Just
like,
for
someone's going to come.
Just for me.
This many years later, they're going to read this and they're going to be like, oh my, that's me right there.
Trust me.
Yeah, Jacob.
From childhood, Jacob, because I am Jacob. I have a Jacob in me that's always fighting the Israel in me.
That's right.
See, something that comes with my childhood is sly, gossip. That's why words affect me so much, because God delivered me from that system. It's a demonic system that I was at. To feel accepted, I would gossip. I would be a tail carrier. I would laugh at both sides. I see Jacob doing that. Jacob is like that. He dwindled between his dad and his mom. Between Leah and Rachel. He loved Rachel's looks, but he couldn't let go of Leah's womb. Oh, he's very. I have a love-hate relationship with him because I see myself in him. Like every time when God wants to, it's I can go on and on. Jacob's hip was when God wrestled with Jacob, God had to wrench his hip, and that's the turning point of Jacob's life. That was the turning point of my life. When I had an accident, this leg went through. Like I really felt like God took his right hand and hit my. It's still there. I can still feel the pain of it, But that was the turning point of my life. I was running away from God. So Jacob, I can go on with many reasons.
Wow.
If you have questions, you can ask.
What about someone from the New Testament?
John.
If it's from the New Testament, John. All right. Jacob and John. All right.
Jacob and John.
I think for me it would probably be David and Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
I'm feeling like Peter nowadays, but I know it's
John. David was so messed up, and yet he loved God. And I think definitely the Peter inside of me that is opinionated.
See, I told you.
Peter that's opinionated,
yes.
love taking risk.
Yes.
Yeah, and want to be like Peter.
Amen.
But yeah, so I think David and Peter for me. So
that's true. I can see that in you.
Yeah. It's like it's the best version of yourself. I think.
Have I told that you're one of my heartfelt worship leaders? I told you, right? I told the world. Yeah. Again, listen to it, and I agree because David was so skillful, like you. There's something about David that I see that in you.
But yeah, just know that the struggle is real. All right, we all go through things. We all have our own struggles. But I think at least the last 5 years for me, it's definitely been a journey of being like David, getting to that place of, yeah, so I messed up, so what? Like it's time to move on. It's time to do things for God. It's like being Peter, right? Like I've denied Christ so many times.
That's exactly what I struggle with.
Yeah.
And I've messed up. It's not easy to move on. So, like Jacob, it took him so many years to move on. I struggle with that. But like David, there are different struggles, right? For people. The same.
I think like most of you watching and people that know us personally probably say, what do you guys struggle with? I think there are definitely times that we have denied Christ in one way or the other. But then there's this boldness that God has given me for some reason in the season, that I'm not ashamed of it, and I'm not going to be apologetic about it either. There's something that there are some things that I'm just going to do because I know there's a favor of God on my life, and I'm not going to keep looking at the number of times I denied Him or messed up, and I'm probably going to mess up again.
Yeah.
But it's okay,
It's okay.
It's okay, let's do this with Jesus. Yeah. So that's so cool. All right. Wow. How's it going?
I'm liking it.
You're liking it. All right.
I like how everything is going, and when he gets the attention, it's amazing.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I want to do this with Nick, so I think most of you know or will know, or for the ones that don't know, he's part of. We are both part of Face2Face and Face2Face Bangalore, and Nickson is my pastor, mentor. I know he laughs, but I keep telling him this and he just laughs at me, but it's okay. All right. It's called accountability or something like that. All right. But we met 6 years back in a restaurant. Big Chicken. And Nick was trying to figure out who this person is. And I was basically new to Bangalore, knew about Face2Face, knew what they were doing, never seen it. Got here, got a little surprised. Was not what I expected. And now I'm part of it. So, God has His own ways of doing things. And like we had a very short conversation. I believe there were some things that we shared to each other. I don't know, what was your take when you first met me? I know I still remember what I told, but brutally honest.
Yeah, I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
You saw right through me, and I was terrified. I was a big chicken in Big Chicken.
No.
I was really terrified because I hate people who see through me. Just don't like it. And I was like, there's another one. Already there's one. He's a big problem in my life, seeing right through me.
No.
And then this man is also seeing right through me.
Put your comments on who it is. All right, we're not going to say who it is.
Yeah,
Just put your
and
comments.
like, at least one does it inside a worship setting. This is doing on a road. So I was just very quiet. I was trying to be very guarded, not giving anything away. But when you said what he said, there's something amazing or very powerful that you carry, and don't be very humble about it. And I was like, what? A man of God telling me not to be humble? No, I didn't think of it like that, but I understood your intention. But the religiosity in me, the traditions in me were fighting. I was like, no, Nickson, be humble. God hates pride. But he said, don't be humble about what you carry. And I think, that has pushed me, propelled me so far in life.
Yeah, so just to clarify, right, before you all decide to, get even with your pastors or mentors, right? So, like for me, that day was about, there are times when God's hand is upon your life, and then, we don't want the world to see it, or we don't want the world to know it, We want it to be a mystery between us and God and no one else.
Very humble about it.
All right. It's like being humble in the sense that we are so protective about it, and we don't want to let anyone in, because that's a holy moment between us and God. And that's what I was saying that day. It's been an amazing journey. So we can sit now and talk about the last
Like
6
this.
years.
Like this.
All right. It was not all the time like this.
Yeah.
All right. We had our interesting days where
We would.
we would not talk.
For those people who think that you can never probably gel well with people, we were one of them.
Yeah.
Oil and water.
Yeah. Hate love. Yeah. Hate love. Yeah. Something like that.
No,
No.
I was the most difficult one.
No.
Trust me.
So
People out there will know. I'm the most
Yeah.
stubborn and difficult one.
so we had long walks. That's what helped us.
Very long walks.
Long walks and
He
long.
hates walking.
Yeah, and I hate walking.
Sure.
And long pauses. I still remember at a train station, we had a conversation, and there was a long pause, and the person who was supposed to come got delayed, and
I was stuck.
he was stuck. I was stuck, and
I was stuck with this question, and I'm like, how do I answer this? Sure.
So yeah,
brought
God-
me far.
yeah. So that all being said, like one of my, I see you as a worshiper, right? So more than anything, I think a lot of people see you as that. I know now you have a title of director and pastor, and some people call you father, and all of that, right? But for me, I see you as a worshiper, and I know this is a little sensitive, but we're still going to talk about it because I believe it's going to help people listening to it. One of my most favorite moments with you or about you is probably one of the darkest days in your life. All right. I hope that was amazing. I'm so thankful for Nick for sharing his heart, but we're not done yet. Come back next week and listen to the rest of our conversation. Next week, we go into something really, really sensitive and deep, and it's going to minister to your hearts. All right. So see you next week. God bless.